Hello everyone, my name is Chris Jordan and welcome to something that I am super excited to share with you guys, my new podcast, Backwards. This is going to be a podcast where I bring on guests that I think are doing really cool stuff, whether they're a photographer, filmmaker, a chef, an athlete. I don't really know who they'll be, but I'm going to find people that I think are doing really cool stuff and invite them to talk to me, and I want to really break down these people's journeys. I want to go back to the beginning, backwards to the beginning. I'm really clever. And learn about when they first started with whatever their craft may be and their journey along the way. What certain mindsets did they have? What certain opportunities led them to where they are now, in hopes that I can learn something and you, the listener, will also learn something. So welcome to the first episode of Backwards. Today's guest is Tyler Babin, who's a great photographer, designer, filmmaker, and right now is the main video editor for Gary Vaynerchuk. If you don't know who Gary Vaynerchuk is, he is a CEO of a media company in New York City who happens to also have a personal brand where he allows us to see what it's like to be a CEO of a huge media company. And it's honestly one of the best channels on YouTube. It's the only channel that I watch consistently. And so I wanted to bring Tyler on and learn about his craft and learn about the person that's behind a lot of the videos that you see for Gary Vaynerchuk. So I think there's a lot of valuable things in this episode, whether you're already a creative or you're hesitant because you feel like you might not be talented enough to be a creative person. If you happen to enjoy this podcast, I would truly appreciate it if you shared it with your friends. Right now, it's just going to be audio. Eventually, I hope to transition it to also having video with the guests, but we'll see. I'm still figuring some things out, and but I truly do appreciate you guys watching this. Thank you so much, and I'll stop talking, get out of the way, and let you guys hear from Tyler. So thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Chris Jordan, and welcome to Backwards. Heck yeah. So to start this off, for the people out there who don't know who you are and are missing out, give a brief description of who you are and what you're doing.
For sure. My name is Tyler Babin. I'm a photographer, filmmaker, designer, currently located in New York City, working for Gary Vaynerchuk at VaynerMedia, focusing around his vlog and video content, GaryVee. My sort of main role here revolves around a lot of editing on his content, as well as documenting and overall art direction. I've been taking more of a lead there. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm up to right now.
And that's awesome. I've been a really big fan of I was watching Gary's videos for a long time, and then I was like, who's behind all this? And so I kind of found your Instagram at the end of it and started following you, and then we've just been talking over the last few months, and you're doing really, really cool stuff.
Thanks, man.
So the main point of bringing you on this podcast is I wanted for people to kind of learn about how you got to where you are now. So where did you grow up, and at what age did you start realizing I want to be a creator?
For sure. I was born in Pensacola, Florida. I lived there until I was 5 years old, and then my family and I moved to Gainesville. We lived there for about another 5 years, and then we moved to Tallahassee after that, and that's really where I grew up. I always had a fascination with cameras. So as soon as we got to Tallahassee, my parents got me my first video camera. It was a big, chunky Canon camcorder, recorded a tape, the whole 9 yards. Mm-hmm. And I just started making videos. I was really into card tricks at that time.
Interesting.
And so I actually, how I learned to film and edit was filming myself doing card tricks. And so they're still in the deep, dark corner of the web of all the original videos I made. But that's how I started learning. And so it transitioned out of card trick videos to making little sketch comedy videos with my friends on the weekend. We all thought we were just going to be famous YouTubers until we realized we just weren't that funny. Mm-hmm. And then after that, when I finished high school is when I started my transition into photography. So I got really deep into photography, just shooting photos of my friends and stuff, whatever we happened to be doing. And then I got a random call one day from a fashion designer in town who somehow knew about my work and had lost the photographer for like a shoot that was happening that day. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know anything about fashion or like how to actually conduct a photo shoot, but I said sure. So packed up and drove over. Terrible photo shoot. It was like the images are god awful. But that's when I started getting interested in the idea of like fashion, right? And it was more so like, it wasn't so like I didn't choose that I wanted to be a fashion photographer. It was just like I did that, and then another person asked, and another person asked, and eventually I became like one of like, I guess I was the known fashion photographer in Tallahassee. So I started shooting for a lot of like the school magazines at FSU when they were kind of doing their thing, and then slowly it transitioned, and I was starting to shoot for like bigger clients, and lots of freelance work was coming through. So I was doing that whole thing, and then there was one like holiday season where like work just like really, really dropped off, and I was like, shit, I don't know what to do. Like at this point, like I had really screwed school up, so like I wasn't doing well there. I was like, I got to figure something out. And so a friend of mine was a manager at like a Staples, and he's like, well, I can get you a job like for like a seasonal thing. And I was like, cool. So I did that, and that was like, I learned probably the most important lesson ever, and it's something like I'll definitely share with my kids, is like you should definitely get a job where you hate what you're doing, because it's going to be like the biggest motivating factor ever.
Absolutely.
The 4 months that I worked for Staples were like the worst section of my entire life. I was just like stocking shelves. It was not fun. But I had a weird like sort of awakening moment one day when I was on my way to work. Not to get super morbid, but I was just like, I had like this really like real understanding that like I was going to die, and that like I really didn't like the work I was doing. 2 days later, I got the words "work harder" tattooed on my arm.
Wow.
Yeah, like I really like just committed. And a few weeks after that, I was able to leave that job, and it was just because I just like really tripled down and like hustled as hard as I could. Ended up getting a design job at a local like startup company in Tallahassee, and it was, I wasn't really a designer. I decided that I was going to learn how to be a designer just because I needed something else to do. So I transitioned over to that company. I worked there for a year, doing everything from like initial ideation to executing on photo shoots, and then designing the advertisements, and then ultimately pushing it out. So I learned a lot. It was a small company, but it was like I was touching everything. So that's how I think I am able to approach things with more of like an art director view now. So the whole time that whole thing was happening, I always knew I wanted to come to New York. I didn't know how it was going to happen though. It seemed like such a big jump, and like everyone in my family had never like done a crazy jump like that, and a lot of it was just like negative input. And so I just kept like saving and like getting to a good place. And then I started just applying for random internships, but I always knew that I really wanted to work for Gary. That was always the goal. Luckily, I timed it so that a design internship opened up right at the time I was starting to like submit these things. So I went like really, really extreme on my application process. I like designed an entire website from the ground up, and like created an entire portfolio that was specifically tailored to VaynerMedia. So
that's smart. That's a really smart idea.
Like 2 months goes by though, and like I didn't hear anything. I was like absolutely devastated. And then on a Sunday night at like 10:30, an email came through that a recruiter wanted to get on the phone with me. Completely lost it. It was the craziest night of my life. So the next day we get on the phone. We ended up doing a few different like rounds of phone interviews, and eventually I got it. So from initially being told you got the internship to like having to be in New York was like 8 days, I think, something like that. So I didn't have a place to live. I didn't have anything. Literally had to like went to Facebook, tracked down some old people I went to school with, and was able to lock down a room for the first month. So I just packed up and put everything in a backpack, bought a one-way ticket, and just jumped. I got here. I worked on a beer brand for a while as a designer. And then at the end of my internship, it was looking like there wasn't going to be a way to transition like into a job here, which is what I wanted. So I sent Gary an email. I said I wanted to sit down for 5 minutes and just chat with him because I was a big fan and I just wanted to like pick his brain for a minute. He said, yeah. So it got rescheduled a million times, but finally the day came. I went up to his office and his assistant was like, sorry, but it's not going to happen. Like, he's running late. So I was kind of devastated. And then as I'm like turning to walk away, he's like, well, hang on. He's going uptown for a meeting. So how would you feel about just jumping in the back of an Uber with him? So I said, yes. So he walks out of a meeting. We run downstairs. We jump in the back of a car. I'm sandwiched between, it's like Gary, I'm in the center, and then D-Rock, Gary's filmer, is filming our entire conversation. So that was nerve-wracking.
Yeah, how intimidating was that? I mean,
the fun thing is I was super prepared for a 5-minute conversation solo, and then I just got completely thrown into it, and it became an hour-long conversation in the back of a cab while there's a camera in my face the entire time. So yeah, I mean, I was shaking. I didn't know what to say. I don't know what Gary happened to see in me to give me a shot, because I was collapsing in front of him. But ultimately we talked for a while. It sort of coincided to a place where they needed an editor. Gary asked me to create some content just on spec to see what I would do. So I made some stuff, and then a few days later, long story short, I ended up on his team. The really funny thing is I had been a designer, and so I thought I was actually going to be a designer on his team, and I walked in first day and they were like, cool, you're doing video. And I actually hadn't ddone video since I had finished high school,
Wow.
4 years prior. And so I couldn't remember how to do anything. And so I went into a super intense 4-month process of sleeping 2 hours a night, learning everything about editing that I could. And that's where we are now.
I think it's interesting that you had prepared just for a 5-minute conversation and you ended up being able to have a 40-minute conversation. And what's interesting to me that I've started to realize in my life is that the most random thing will happen to you, and usually that random opportunity will become one of the greatest things that will lead to a huge opportunity, as it did with you. One of the things that I wanted to go back to that you were talking about, it seems that you get a lot of opportunities that maybe you're not the most prepared for in the beginning. Obviously you're able to take on those tasks and learn everything you need to know, and you've been crushing it. But it seems that you were thrown into a photo shoot job when you weren't really sure how to do that, and then you had to become a designer without being a designer prior, and then you had to become an editor for Gary without editing for about 4 years. So how exactly do you deal with that pressure?
So it's a double-edged sword. I will say I think I have the worst imposter syndrome out of anyone. I constantly sort of get the vibe, and I'm I look around with the people I'm able to work with right now, and the seat that I sit in, and the job I'm doing, and I'm how the hell did this happen? I shouldn't be here. But that being said, anytime that an opportunity arose, I always just said yes. I think it's always just say yes and figure it out later.
I completely agree.
Yeah, so that's been a big thing, is anytime any opportunity came up, I always said yes. And it was always I don't know, I'll just figure it out. And I don't know if I've gotten lucky or if I'm okay at what I do or what. But I've been able to squeeze through every time, even though I've not known what I was going to do on multiple occasions.
It's interesting to hear that, because you completely fooled me, at least over the last few months. I would have never assumed that you'd been thrown in that position and then had to learn how to do what you are doing and, doing successfully. I think it's interesting, though, that you are able to do that, because I think where a lot of people fall short is that they will look at what people are already doing and they'll begin to compare themselves and be like, oh, this person has, achieved this and they're doing all these cool things that I want to do, but, I'm a beginner and I don't really know how to do that right now. And that's where a lot of people will stop, because they're scared of trying because they may not be as good as this person. So how do you deal with that sort of dilemma? Do you deal with that yourself?
Yeah, I mean, so it's something I struggle with a ton too. There's a lot of people I look at this agency that work on our team, and I'm nowhere near as talented as they are. But and it always seems to come back to this moment of like whenever I was like on my way to work that day and I just had the idea that like I was really gonna die and it like freaked me out. It's just that I gotta at least try, you know. And there goes back to this moment, this thing my dad told me. Like my dad was in the military when I was growing up, and he went to school really late. He was in like his late 20s when he was like really starting college, and he tells me this story about like he was talking to like one of his coworkers or something like that, and he was like, I don't know if I should do this, like everyone else is going to be so much younger than me, like they've got way more of an advantage. He's like, I'm going to be 30 soon, like that was a thing. And at the end of the day, he was like, 30 comes whether you do this or not, so you might as well like give it a shot, you know, like you got to try. Like the idea of what if like terrifies me, and I can't live with that pressure. So that's why like every time I get a weird idea or like I want to try something, I'll at least try and throw everything at the wall I can and see what sticks, because just the idea of like laying in bed at night and wondering like what if I would have tried that and like I didn't, like I just can't live with that.
Yeah. I know, I completely agree. I seriously think about that like all the time. And I've recently had that, you know, like you're oh man, I'm going to die, and like I want, you know, right now I'm doing something that I don't love. Like I've recently had that realization. I think that once people get to that point, like that's really the turning point. And like you've had that, I feel like I'm starting to have that. And so like for anybody that's listening who's like working at a job that they don't like, that sucks. But I think they should look at that as like kind of a good thing, because they're not happy where they are. So why not like find where you want to be and start there, and you know, quit that job and kind of work for it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think complacency is really dangerous, and so I almost, it's gonna sound really weird, but I almost like the moments where like I feel myself get complacent, because I immediately like pull the emergency brake and go like the opposite direction. And so I think, I don't know, maybe that's like a DNA thing with me, but it always like keeps me wanting to like go in new directions every time I feel myself getting comfortable.
That's definitely, and that's a good thing to do as well. It's scary, I guess, because like once you've hit that comfort zone, it's nice, but there's so much like better things that happen once you break out of the comfort zone. At least in my experience, and it seems for your experience as well. So I mean, I think it's really cool to hear how you've gotten to that point, because for me, I mean, I literally would have never guessed that you just were thrown into so many things. Like I just thought like, man, you really like put in the time and that's how you got the opportunity, but you kind of got the opportunity and then put in the time. Yeah. And I think there's like a good lesson there. So now I want to talk to you about what it is that you're doing now, and kind of so right now you're editing Gary's life pretty much every single day, and kind of wanted you to talk about that process and how it is to, you know, edit someone's life every single day. Like how are you able to do that? How are you able to live your life at the same time? And yeah, just talk about that.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Living like through someone else's life is tough. It's hard to like have both lives at the same time, but it's cool. Luckily he's a pretty interesting guy, and so it's, you know, every day is like kind of refreshing to be able to work on it. It's also been nice now that I'm like filming more too, so I'm not just like sitting at a desk every day. But you know, it's funny. I was riding with him on the way to the airport the other night, and like he got off on a flight, and like I was getting back in the car, and I was on my way back to the city, and I texted him, and I was just like, dude, like I just can't, like the amount of stuff I'm learning just being around him. Like I never considered myself like a business person or being interested in business, but like there are days where I'm like, shit, man, I might go start a business. You know, like it's crazy. Like just learning so much.
I'm sure being around him for like 5 minutes is just like, yep, I'm gonna go be a CEO of something.
I know, it's crazy.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I mean, it's very motivating, but it's tough. I mean, you know, I'm working a minimum of probably 60 hours a week, and it goes only higher from there. So balancing, you know, work life and my girlfriend and everything, and trying to like keep everything in the 24 hours we get is very, very difficult. I remember whenever we went from, it was difficult before we even went to the daily format of daily. I remember the day that Gary said he wanted to go daily, I like had a panic attack, and I was like, it's not possible. We can't do it. Like it's like DailyVee. I kept saying DailyVee is not designed to be a daily vlog, because unlike a traditional vlog setup. Like if you look at like Casey or someone like that, like he knows the story he wants to tell in the beginning of the day, and then he films what he needs to tell that story, as opposed to what we do, in which like the camera just runs for like 8 hours a day, and then I sit down with a bunch of footage and have to figure out a story to tell.
Yeah.
So that's like the weird like reverse of our format. But it's cool. I mean, it's pushed me into a lot of new directions. Like I said, I never thought it was going to be able to be doable, but like we haven't missed a day yet, so everything's running pretty smooth.
Yeah, definitely. So how does that kind of work? Like, I'm just curious. Because sometimes you'll be filming, but most of the time you'll be editing and D-Rock will be filming. At the end of the day, does he tell you like, hey, like this is kind of the message that I captured for the day, or do you just go into it with like no like knowledge?
It ebbs and flows. We're really trying to like build out our communication skills more. But as much as he can tell me, like the thing we've learned is even if he gives me these insanely detailed notes, it doesn't change the fact that I have to like sit down and watch all the footage to like figure out what's all going on. So he does try to communicate ideas, and like he'll let me know if like, yo, there's a special moment in this meeting, so maybe we build the majority of the episode out around this one conversation or something like that. But a lot of it is really solo too. I mean, it's me like sitting down with headphones on and like watching it and just trying to figure out what story I can tell.
Wow. I can just like,
yeah.
I mean, I know it's like, it's awesome. And like what you're doing is seriously like really good for a lot of people. And I'll get to that question in a second, but that's just gotta be kind of tough. Like, do you have days where you're just like, man, this is just really, really tough? Or are you at the point now where you kind of, you're going to be able to do it every single day?
No, I mean, there's still, tomorrow is like, I'm terrified of tomorrow. I've looked at Gary's schedule, and just like the amount of meetings and like the amount I know is going to be filmed is like already giving me anxiety. There's definitely days where I'm like, this just isn't possible. But in a lot of ways, it's helped me be very unromantic whenever it comes to the work. Like, I'm pretty unemotional about like cutting things, like if that's what I have to do. So I'm still at the place where like I know I can get the edit done between 8 and 10 hours, and like that's what I need. So now it's like, I guess just maybe a mental switch I made that like I know I can get these done. But yeah, I mean, there are days where it's like it's a stretch. And the really tough thing is like, not every day you're feeling creative, like days where like I don't even want to get out of bed in the morning, much less have to like come up with this like creative thing. And so that's really tough. Knowing that
how do you push through like a creative burnout? Because I mean, I think everybody does that. And that's kind of like the issue with like the daily thing. I don't want to be creative like every single day, not in a lazy format, but just kind of a burnout. So how do you push through that?
So I'm getting to a place now where like I'm letting myself take more breaks. And so like Gary was on vacation last week, so I like really tried to unplug at that moment too. I've sort of found my limits as to like how far I can go before I really need to like unplug for a little bit. And like when I do unplug, it's like on a pretty extreme level. But yeah, I mean, I kind of don't have a choice though. Like I know that a video has to go up tomorrow, and like I just have to do it, So there's plenty of days where like I'm pressing publish and I don't like what I make. I was listening to this interview with Jeff Staple the other day. He's a designer in the city, and he said that he was like, whenever you get to a level like as a creative where you're producing things daily and like you really are like making a living off this, you have to make like the decision that you're okay with making things and putting them out that you don't like. And that was like an interesting thing for me. It was one of those things like I felt like I knew that. I just like I needed someone to tell me that, because there's plenty of days. I mean, there are days that I'm like so excited about the video that we're putting out, and days where I like don't even want anyone in the world to see it, or I don't want my name attached to it, because it's scary. I mean, there are days where you just don't feel it,
Absolutely. But I guess the best thing about that is videos and art is all subjective. So like you say that, but you have 50,000 people who watch every single day who, for the most part, really, really love it. So I guess that's at least rewarding, whether you're like feeling bad about the video or not. People still love it. I've had things like that where I'm like, man, this is crap. I got to put it out though, and then people like, will be like, hey, this is so good, and it's like, well, maybe I was I was wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of days where like the episodes I'm super excited about like don't get the best feedback, and then the
No,
days where
I feel that.
I'm like this episode sucks, and everyone's like, yo, this is amazing. I'm like, why though? It's terrible.
It makes me mad when that happens, but you just
Yeah.
got to take it. I mean, everything is subjective, but I always question. I'm like, maybe I'm like I have terrible taste and everyone else has better taste. I don't know, but yeah. So since that is what you do every single day, you know what do you think that you guys are really doing? There's a lot of you guys on, you know, on Team Gary, and so what do you think that you're producing now, and what do you think it's going to be in, you know, like 5 years from now?
That's interesting because, you know, the funny thing is like we only started GaryVee a year ago. You know what I mean? It's still so early. And to see how much is changing in Gary's career and personal life and everything like that. I mean, it's tough to even think about what would happen 5 years out. Like I'm trying to figure out what's going to happen next week. That's kind of the tough thing. But like Gary says, it's always like more and more and more. And so I'm sure we're going to continue like kind of riding the wave we're on right now. And you know, as he starts executing on the things he's talking about right now with buying brands and building them up and doing things like that, the story will always be ever changing. You know, no 2 days are ever the same. So, I mean, we're just going to keep putting out content and building it up more and more. And whenever he owns the Jets, then we'll make a big movie about his life.
Yeah, that's gonna be. I was thinking about that. I was just like, I wonder eventually, because he's about to become like pretty much a celebrity with the Planet of the Apps show, and it's like once that grows and kind of the legacy goes on, like if he'll actually have a movie, you know, called probably Gary or Vaynerchuk. That's what they like to do, is just take one of the names. It'd be cool though. It'd be cool if like all of you guys got to make it as well. That'd be interesting.
On some level, I always think that like we're making it right now. Like sometimes he does interviews and he's like, all right, they're like, so after you buy the Jets, what's next? He's like, then they make a big movie about my life. And I'm like, so what does that mean? Like I sit down with the last 40 years of footage and like just edit it together into like one 7-day documentary. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, but I feel like we're making it already.
Do you think that the way that you guys are building this brand around him and doing this daily documenting, do you think it's gonna start being, I mean, obviously there's a lot of daily vloggers, but you know, I don't really watch other business people who are doing this and like regular celebrities. Do you think it's going to, you know, like take on, like other people are going to do it as well?
Yeah, I think so. Especially, you know, we have, you know, we're the first to do the format of like, he's a daily vlogger that never holds the camera. You know what I mean? Like that's an interesting dynamic. But yeah, I think that, especially, you know, if you've heard of like Vayner Talent and the things we're doing over there, I think it is going to be a very popular thing to have a camera guy follow you around on your day to day.
It's gonna be really interesting. I've heard other interviews where you talked about like that's what you wanted to do. Is that true? Like you wanted to kind of go around and be with more people than just, you know, one person?
Yeah, and that's actually like shameless plug, my series Conversations with Legends I just started. That's sort of
good.
Thank you so much. That's sort of the initial exploration in that idea of spending like maybe a day or 2 days with individual people and like tell their story as much as I can. And it's also like very selfish in a lot of ways. Like it's me just trying to find mentors and like people that have like gone through what I'm going through right now. And so maybe they can sort of help guide me along my path. But yeah, I mean, I would love to be able to just spend days with people and just learn about their life and take the bits and pieces of it that I can apply to mine that will help me grow and just slowly start my world domination.
So do you think that's what you'll do eventually? I mean, obviously right now you're doing like really awesome stuff and you're probably going to ride that out for a long time. But as for you just personally, like where do you see yourself in 5 years?
You know, it's funny because that's another one like almost similar to like when I look at like where I was at in my life a year ago, I like if a year ago you would have told Tyler like what he's doing right now, I would have been like, absolutely not, you're crazy. So to think like what's going to be happening in 5 years is super exciting. I definitely plan on staying in Gary's ecosystem for a very long time, though. I think the things that are happening with him and just the opportunities that are going to arise are very valuable. And also, I just enjoy what I'm doing. Like, I have a lot of creative freedom. But yeah, I want to be able to spend time working on Conversations with Legends, see where that goes. I have a million other ideas. I really want to learn about like music production and maybe start a creative agency. And like, I don't know, there's so many different things that I got to check off the list. So I'm not sure what order they'll come in, but I do have a strong feeling in my gut that Conversations with Legends is going to be a really big thing.
Dude, I hope so. That'd be super cool. I would love to see that. Cool. So just a few more things. I want to go to Twitter. We put out a tweet, and some people that followed you had some questions. So the first one came from Cipolla. That's an interesting name. He wanted to, and you've kind of talked about this a little bit. We can get more specific, but when you're going out and you're filming Gary, how do you approach getting certain shots in order to kind of like minimize editing later on? With D-Rock, you know, you kind of have to go with someone else's style, but when it's your own style, how do you approach that?
So it's funny, like filming Gary is kind of like trying to cage a bull. Like, you're just sort of along for the ride. So you can't plan a ton, or like, you know, you're all just sort of at the mercy of what he's doing or where he walks, or, you know, there's been tons of times where I like have this perfect shot set up where he's going to like walk through the frame and he like walks halfway and then decides to just like change his mind and goes the other way or something like that. But that's something, it's kind of like an everyday thing I'm trying to get better at. But it's funny, like I watch like all of his little mannerisms and like the things he does. And so I try to sort of get ahead of him as much as I can and be able to plan for what he's going to do. Another big thing that I've noticed is whenever, say like I'm filming a meeting, whenever I hear the part of the meeting, then I'm like, all right, I know that's the part that I want to include in the edit. I'll then start thinking in terms of like from a B-roll perspective, what else is going to complement it. So once I have that, maybe I'll stop focusing in on Gary quite as much. And that's like maybe when I'll walk outside the office, or I'll focus on trying to get like moving shots or like panning or things like that. I try to, as much as I can, structure out the edit in my head as I'm filming.
Speaking from that, you said like you'd step out of the room to film. What gear do you use to get like the audio and just with camera gear? I know that a lot of people listening to this are gonna also be filmmakers and photographers. Yeah.
So from a camera wise, we shoot with an A7S. We use a Metabones adapter to a Canon 24-70 2.8, which is cool because the Metabones actually gives you an extra stop of light. So like a 2.8 becomes what's the next one, like 1.4 or 1.8 or something like that.
1.8.
I think is like the next drop. I didn't pay attention. I actually failed my first photography class in college, so
I'm super bad on the technical scale.
Yeah.
When people who don't know anything about cameras, I can fool them, but you know, if I'm talking to someone who knows their stuff, I really gotta just like try to convince them I know what I'm talking about. But.
So that's the camera, and then we also use a Sennheiser. I'm using the new AVX system, which is like this weird sort of like Bluetooth radio wave. I don't know like how it works, but it's like this really amazing wireless mic. It's got super long range, and it's also like a direct connect. So like one issue that we like have sometimes, if he's doing an interview and like they also like whoever's doing the interview also has them mic'd up, sometimes there can be like radio interference, and like you have to like make sure people are on different frequencies and all that stuff. But the mic system we use is just like a direct connection between the mic and receiver, so it doesn't create any frequency issues if there's other mics in the room, which like seems like a random thing, but it's like saved me multiple times, and so I like that a lot.
That's so nice. Yeah, I just know that a lot of people are going to be like, well, what do you use? I'm sure you get that question all the time.
Quite a bit.
So the second question comes from, I hope I don't butcher this, Lindo Corchi on Twitter. And he wanted to ask you how different your life would have been if you had stayed in Florida instead of gone to New York City. I don't even think it would have happened, honestly. Like, I knew that I was going to make the jump at some point. I was at the job that I left to come here, I was already like feeling myself like starting to have wandering eyes and like looking at other things. If I had stayed in Florida, I probably would have left that job and just taken all that knowledge and probably started my own company, like my own like digital shop.
The only issue and the thing that freaks me out about that is like I just wouldn't want to like make advertisements for like used car dealerships and things like that. That would freak me out. But yeah, I mean, I'd still be doing the same thing I'm doing, like just on a much smaller scale. Yeah, and I would have probably just ended up starting my own shop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about, the car dealerships. Me and my friend are kind of doing like a kind of a creative shop right now, and I don't want to get into that space because they're all the same.
Like that and like like that and like I don't know, like air conditioning manufacturers. I feel like would be a thing. I don't know.
That stuff is not fun, but there's always commercials for it. Someone's making them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But interesting, cool. So the last question from Twitter, someone is asking. His name is Carl Leduc. You guys have weird names. Carl Leduc W. It's just hard to say. He asks, if you had to create daily content as a videographer or filmmaker, what would it look like? So I guess say you weren't working for Gary and you were just doing your own thing and trying to create maybe a YouTube channel. What would you be doing?
I mean, that's one thing that like. If I didn't work for Gary, I would literally start a daily vlog tomorrow. If I had time, I would do it right now. I'm trying to like do one, and I've been like editing the same like week that I had in LA for like 6 months. It'll get done at some point. But yeah, I would focus on creating as many pillar pieces of content that I could. So it would be a daily vlog and then conversations with legends, and then use those two pillar pieces of content to break down into like micro forms and use that to sort of supplement like Instagram and things like that and build up my own personal brand, which is something I'm working on like all the time anyways, building up my own brand. But I would really just like go headfirst into it, and I would just try and travel and like document as much of the stuff that I was doing. So yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that a lot of people could do, and this is what I've done, is honestly just kind of look at what you guys are doing with Gary, because you have like, you know, the daily vlog, but from that, like, a lot of things are pulled to make smaller content for other platforms, and like I really never thought about that until I started seeing you guys doing it, and I think that's like super valuable. But yeah, cool. So the last question that I have for you, so imagine that your entire life has gone by, you've done a lot of things. What are you hoping to be remembered by? It's kind of deep. You can get deep if you want to.
That's a
it's
tough
a big
one.
question, but I'm curious.
So you know what? I'll get super honest. I was on the subway the other day. I was on my way to work, and I felt like I was being far too selfish in like my own endeavors of like me just wanting to be famous and things like that. And I was like, shit, like I really want to like leave the world a better place than what I came here. So I'm currently brainstorming on more charitable type things. I'd like to be able to work for some nonprofits and things like that, and just have as many eyes see my work and for it to help as many people as I can. That's a big thing. But I don't know. I want to be able to work in a bunch of different mediums. Like I said, like I went from, you know, video to photo to design back to video. I want to get into music now. Like I just want to be able to like touch as many things as I can and be remembered as not just like, oh, he's a good editor, he's a good photographer, but like he was a good artist. That I think is something that's been on my mind a lot recently.
I agree with that. No, I actually like every single day I think about that, because I dabble in photos and video, and I also have like been a musician for a long time, and I look at certain people, like I look at Childish Gambino a lot of time.
That's he's like my hero.
That's the dude, right? He's like a freaking Renaissance man, and I think
Absolutely.
that's kind of what we both want to be remembered as, and I think that's a really cool thing. Well, yeah, so that's really all I had for you. I really appreciate you coming on this podcast, being the first guest on this podcast.
Absolutely.
If you want to leave with any certain words, and then give your links where people can find you if people are listening that don't know who you are.
For sure. The best place to get in touch with me is Instagram. I'm just at Tyler Babin. I'm like really trying to like triple down on like my community there, so I try to respond to every single DM. It's getting a little bit out of control. Like I don't know how Gary manages it, because like I'm already like completely like underwater.
Wow.
So that's the place to go. I'm also tylerbabin.com, if you want to see old work that I always forget to update. Twitter is at Tyler_Babin, and then Facebook I'm just like never on anymore, so I don't even know where to find me there. But yeah, those are my links. I'm always down to chat. I want to talk to everybody in the world, so definitely reach out to me.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for being on the podcast, and everybody who's listening, if you're not watching his stuff, going on Instagram, following him, making a mistake, stop what you're doing, do that. And yeah, all right. Thank you.
Yeah, man, absolutely. This was good.
And there you have it, the first episode of Backwards with our great guest, Tyler Babin. I just want to say thank you to everybody who checked out this episode and listened to what we had to discuss. I think there was seriously a lot of great things that I'm considering now when I'm going into projects. And I think the biggest thing that I really got is just, when opportunities are thrown your way, whether you think you're prepared or not, just go for it. Obviously, be willing to put in the work and the effort to make yourself more ready than you may think. So that way you don't mess up the opportunity, but, don't be scared to tackle something that, scares you a little bit. I think that's where the special things can happen. But if you guys enjoyed this podcast, as I said in the intro, it would mean so much if you decided to share it on Facebook or Twitter or wherever. And make sure you're following Tyler Babin on all of his social medias. And if you're interested in following me, my name is Chris Jordan, and my Twitter and Instagram handle is I'm Chris Jordan, just I am and then Chris Jordan, and you'll find me. And yeah, this is a new podcast that I'm starting. Gonna be, having guests on fairly often, and hoping to really build this thing up over, the next few months and years, and however long I can actually get people to talk to me. But that's really all I had to say. Just thank you so much for checking it out, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you guys next time on Backwards.